The night she sold her dignity to save her daughter's life, she had no idea the man buying it was the one who destroyed it. The hotel corridor stretched before her, dim and endless, marble floors reflecting light she didn't deserve to walk on. Maya's hands trembled as she gripped the crumpled hospital bill in her coat pocket. The numbers burned into her memory. $85,000. She stopped outside the door, closed her eyes, and let herself remember why she was here. "I told myself it was just one night," she would say later, replaying this moment over and over. "That no one would ever know, that I was doing it for her, only for her." 3 days earlier, her daughter Lily had collapsed during a school play, her small body crumpling to the stage floor as parents gasped. The rural clinic didn't have the equipment to help her. The city hospital did, but only if Maya could pay. Now, standing outside a stranger's hotel room, everything she believed about herself hung suspended in the air like smoke. She knocked. The door opened. She stepped inside, and when the man turned on the lamp and saw her face, he went completely still, because he knew exactly who she was. Before I continue our story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let me take you back before the hospital bills, before the desperate phone calls, before she ever thought she'd knock on a stranger's door. Maya grew up in a small village where the sunflower fields stretched wider than any horizon she'd ever known. She wasn't rich, she wasn't from anywhere important, but her life was hers, built with her own 2 hands, filled with small joys that mattered more than any fortune. She sold handmade goods at the local market, woven baskets, embroidered scarves, jars of honey from her neighbors' hives. She laughed easily, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile, even when they didn't know why. And her daughter, Lily, ran through those sunflower fields like she owned every inch of them, her small feet kicking up dust, her laughter carrying across the open land. Before all of this, Maya would later say, "I had a simple life, not rich, not perfect, but it was mine." Every evening, Maya braided Lily's hair by lamplight, her fingers moving through the strands with a tenderness that spoke louder than any words. It was a ritual, a moment of connection that anchored them both to something steady in an unpredictable world. Then came the school play. Lily, dressed as a sunflower for the spring pageant, stepped onto the stage and simply folded to the ground. The gasp that rippled through the audience, the frantic rush to the local clinic. The doctor's face, careful and grave, delivering words that would change everything. "A rare heart condition," he said. "She needs surgery immediately. The cost will be significant." Maya's face didn't crumble into tears, not yet. Just silence, the kind of silence that swallows a person whole, leaving nothing behind but the echo of a ticking clock. "They said the words," she remembered, "but all I heard was time running out." What followed was a spiral of desperation that ate away at every hour of her days. She went to the bank, denied. She called family members who had nothing left to give. She started a crowdfunding page that raised barely $3,000, a drop in an ocean of need. Lily had 72 hours. Maya had nothing. Late one night, sitting alone while Lily slept fitfully beside her, Maya opened her phone and scrolled to a number she hadn't dialed in years. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She hesitated. As she reached for her journal to distract herself, a photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor. She picked it up with shaking hands, a younger version of herself, smiling, standing beside a tall, well-dressed young man at what looked like a university event. She stared at it for a long moment before shoving it back between the pages, as if hiding it could erase the memory entirely. There was one world I had escaped, one door I had promised myself I'd never open again. It was through a mutual contact that a woman appeared in Maya's life, a woman who spoke in careful, practiced euphemisms, someone the village called a fixer. She found Maya at the market, spoke softly, professionally, as if she were discussing a woman's body and dignity rather than a woman's body and dignity. "One night," the fixer said, "a private client, discreet, he pays well, very well." Maya said nothing. Her eyes drifted to Lily's hospital bracelet lying on the kitchen table, a small plastic band that represented everything at stake. "I didn't say yes right away," Maya insisted later. "I want you to know that." But eventually she did say yes. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was who that private client truly was. The hotel where Maya was instructed to go stood in the heart of the city, a monument to wealth she'd never touched. Marble floors stretched beneath a crystal chandelier that scattered light like something out of a dream she'd never allowed herself to have. She rode the elevator alone, catching her reflection in the mirrored doors. A woman she barely recognized, dressed carefully, trying to look like she belonged somewhere she desperately didn't. "I kept telling myself," she recalled, "you are not this person. You are just a mother doing what mothers do." She reached the door, knocked. It opened to reveal a silhouette, an expensive watch catching the low light, a tailored shirt, broad shoulders she couldn't quite place in the darkness. He gestured her inside without a word. The room beyond was dim, illuminated only by the glittering skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. There was small talk, stilted and tense. Maya kept her eyes lowered, focused on anything but his face. Then he reached over and turned on a lamp. The light spilled across the room, and Maya lifted her eyes just as his gaze settled fully on her face. He froze. The glass in his hand tilted dangerously before he caught it, his knuckles white against the crystal. "Maya!" His voice came out barely audible, a whisper that seemed to shake the air between them. Her head snapped up, and there he was, Daniel Cole, 34 years old, a name whispered in business magazines and technology headlines across the country, the same man from the photograph tucked away in her journal. 5 full seconds of silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. In that moment, Maya would later say, 10 years collapsed into one breath. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what came before. 10 years earlier, Maya and Daniel had been young, inseparable, deeply in love. They'd met at university, she on scholarship, carrying the weight of her village's hopes on her shoulders. He already wealthy, already burdened with a family name that demanded perfection, yet somehow still grounded, still kind, still hers. They were happy, genuinely, foolishly happy. Then came the pregnancy, Lily. Daniel's family, powerful, calculating, unwilling to accept a scholarship girl as anything more than a temporary distraction, intervened with the full force of their influence. Threats were made, money was offered, ultimatums were delivered with cold precision. Maya was paid off, told to disappear, instructed to tell Daniel she'd lost the baby. She had no choice. She vanished. Standing in that hotel room now, 10 years later, Maya's eyes filled, not with tears, but with a rage that had been simmering for a decade. "Don't say my name," she said, her voice shaking with fury she'd buried for years. She turned to leave, but Daniel stepped in front of the door, and what he said next she never expected. "I looked for you," he said, his voice breaking. "For 2 years I looked for you." "Your family found me first," Maya spat back. The air seems to leave the room entirely. Daniel sank into a chair as though something inside him had just shattered beyond repair. Trembling, Maya finally told him why she was there. The surgery, Lily, the 72 hours ticking away while she stood in a stranger's hotel room selling what was left of her pride. She didn't tell him Lily was his daughter, not yet. That truth felt too enormous, too dangerous to release into a room already thick with a decade of pain. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then, "How much do you need?" "I didn't come here for charity," Maya said, fury rising in her voice. "Then what did you come here for, Maya?" And she realized she didn't have an answer because the truth was too dangerous to say out loud. The next morning, Maya discovered that Daniel had already wired the full amount anonymously through the fixer. She stood in the hospital hallway, staring at the confirmation on her phone, feeling relief crash into guilt, which crashed into something she couldn't quite name. Lily's surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Rosa, Maya's older neighbor and the closest thing she had to a mother, noticed the unraveling happening beneath Maya's careful composure. "You look like someone who got what they wanted and lost something worse," Rosa said, studying Maya's face with the sharp intuition only decades of friendship could grant. Maya broke down but didn't reveal everything, just, "Someone from my past came back." Rosa's eyes drifted to a drawing taped to the refrigerator, Lily's crayon rendering of a tall man, a woman, and a little girl, all holding hands. Rosa said nothing, but something in her expression suggested she understood far more than Maya had spoken aloud. Meanwhile, in his penthouse across the city, Daniel pulled out an old box he'd kept hidden for years. Photographs of Maya, a letter he'd written that had been returned unopened, a university identification card with her smiling face. His assistant entered the room, papers in hand. "Sir, the board meeting." "Cancel it," Daniel said, his voice flat. He stared at the photograph of young Maya and for the first time in years allowed himself to feel the full weight of his grief. He was not a villain in this story. He was a man who had also been a victim of his family's cruelty, robbed of a choice he never got to make. And then, Daniel did something nobody expected. He got in his car and he drove to the village. It took hours to reach the small home where Maya lived, tucked between fields of sunflowers that swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. He asked around, following directions from strangers, until he found himself standing outside her window. Through the glass, he watched Maya helping Lily with a puzzle at the kitchen table. Lily laughed, and it was his laugh, his eyes, his hands moving the puzzle pieces with the same careful precision he remembered from his own childhood. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He already knew. He knocked anyway. Maya opened the door and saw him standing there. Fury and fear collided across her face. She stepped outside quickly, pulling the door closed behind her to shield Lily from whatever was about to unfold. "You have no right to be here," she hissed. "She's mine, isn't she?" Daniel asked, his voice quiet, devastated. Silence stretched between them, the longest silence either of them had ever endured. "She's mine," Maya said fiercely. The wind picked up around them, scattering leaves across the dirt path. Behind them, the sunflower field swayed, beauty and chaos existing in the same breath. Everything came out then. 10 years of pain, sacrifice, loneliness, and love. All of it unfiltered, spilling into the space between them like a dam finally breaking. "Your mother handed me an envelope and told me to disappear," Maya said, her voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. "And I did, because I had nothing, and you had everything, and you never came. They told me you were gone, that you chose to leave. I believed them because I was a coward." Both of them broke down, standing there in the dirt path between the sunflowers and the small house that held the daughter neither of them had known how to protect. "We were two people who had been robbed of each other, and neither of us knew how to grieve something we never got to bury," Maya would later reflect. The next morning, Lily was wheeled into surgery. Maya held her small hand until the very last second, whispering reassurances that felt hollow even as she said them. Daniel sat in the waiting room. Maya hadn't invited him, but she hadn't told him to leave either. They sat on opposite ends of a bench, not speaking, simply waiting together in a silence that somehow felt less lonely than the silence of the past decade. Somewhere in that sterile, fluorescent waiting room, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first crock of light through a very long darkness. Hours passed. Finally, the surgeon emerged, his expression unreadable until he spoke the words Maya had been praying to hear. Surgery successful. Maya collapsed into a chair with relief, her body finally releasing the tension it had carried for days. Daniel exhaled, and for the first time, his eyes filled with visible tears. Maya looked at him. For the first time since that night in the hotel room, she didn't look away. But the story wasn't finished. Daniel's mother, the woman who had orchestrated everything a decade ago, who had torn two young lovers apart with money and threats, arrived at the hospital, having tracked his son's movements through his assistant. She saw Maya first. Her face went pale, the color draining as recognition dawned. She looked through the recovery room window at Lily, sleeping peacefully after surgery. And for the first time in her calculating, controlled life, this cold woman crumbled entirely. She reached into her bag with trembling hands and pulled out an old, worn letter. Daniel's original letter to Maya, written a decade ago, never sent. She had intercepted it, hidden it away, buried the truth along with two young people's future. She handed it to Maya without a single word and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor. Maya's hands shook as she opened the letter, unfolding paper that waited 10 years to be read. He had written, "I don't care about the money or the name. I just want you. I just want our child. Tell me where you are and I will come. I will always come." Maya looked up, her eyes finding Daniel across the hallway. He didn't know what was written in the letter. He was watching Lily sleep through the recovery room window, unaware that the truth he'd always deserved to know was finally in Maya's trembling hands. She walked to him slowly, handed him the letter without a word. He read it. His face shifted from confusion to devastation, then to something raw and real that Maya hadn't seen in his eyes since they were young and foolish and in love. "I meant every word," Daniel said, his voice barely holding together. "I know," Maya whispered. "I know that now." They didn't embrace, they didn't kiss, they simply stood there together, two people standing at the beginning of something terrifying and necessary, something neither of them fully understood yet, but both were willing to walk toward. Later that day, Lily awoke in her hospital bed, reaching immediately for her crayons and paper. She drew the same picture she'd drawn dozens of times before, a tall man, a woman, and a little girl standing together. But this time, for the first time, she colored it in completely, filling every space with vibrant color instead of leaving it blank and waiting. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a road you choose to walk every single day. And that morning, for the first time in 10 years, I took the first step. Some families are broken by circumstance. Some are rebuilt by courage. If Maya had never knocked on that door, Lily might not have survived. But would you have made the same choice she did? Let us know in the comments, what would you have done in her position? And do you think Maya should forgive Daniel, or is 10 years of silence unforgivable? Drop your answer below. We want to hear your thoughts. If this story broke your heart, wait until you hear about the woman who raised her husband's secret child for 7 years without knowing the truth. That story is coming next. Subscribe so you never miss a story that reminds you love is never as simple as it seems.